5, 4. And where'd the
Hi everybody.
how do all around us? Anywho, well, let's go ahead and do this part because I'm kind of having to wing it. You shouldn't start laughing while you're trying to blow a horn. Oh, I did it. All right. Hog Samayok. And stuff and things.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
What? Hey, could you give me one of those waters, please? Well, so before this thing started, I really was reminded that our equipment had not yet been fixed. I got so fixated on getting the place ready that I forgot to. So we come up with an idea. What? My fur looks bad? Little girl, I gotta see my fur. What?
Okay.
You can't fix ugly, sorry. I can't see it well enough to do anything about it anyway. So anywho, we figured out there might be enough. You can't use the mouse to roll up and down the screen for some reason. It does everything else. You spin it around and it'll click on things and you can highlight things, but you can't use the rolly ball. What's up with that? So anywho, that's still not going to work, though we did. So anywho, you guys know that every year we wind up talking about this is Shavuot, and we talk about the Christian thing and them calling it Pentecost because you go from 50 days after the first Shabbat, and then that's those 50 days are basically the fruits. You know, it happens at the beginning, but it goes for 50 days. And then at the end of that 50 days, the law of God is given, not giving, but given. Although it's always giving. Anywho, that was, we'll all work on that one. So, you know, I always point out that the there on the day of Shavuot, even according to the New Testament, it says that there were Jews, calls them out calls them Jews. Spell it out because they just transliterate the Hebrew words, so it's not an actual Greek word, but they transliterate the Hebrew, and I think it comes out Yudi, which is generally the one you get for almost all languages. The Germans use Juden, and there are a couple of other languages that have done the same. Sorry, it's squeaking back there and driving me crazy. Not used to hold my legs together. Anyway, and then it said there were Jews, and what was the other one? The proselytes, but what they call them? Devout men. In other words, Torah observant men. And I say proselytes, and I'm kind of, there had to have been proselytes there, but the word really, to say devout men, it would be more like saying, well, there were Jews there, and there were Jews that lived according to God's law there. There were Jews and there were devout men, get it? So I know without any doubt there were proselytes there. But we think of the Gentile court, for instance, we think of that as being a place where non-Jews come to celebrate. Really? Why would they do that? Think back. This is 2,000 years ago. There was no church. There were no Christians. This is everything that's going on at this particular time is Judaism, right? It's all Jews, and it's the Jewish court. It's the Jewish religion. So why would a non-Jew be there? I mean, if you think about it, you get this idea because 100 years, 1,500 years after the cross. Did I mention it was 1,500 years after? King James told the people who wanted to translate the Bible that they had to put the word church everywhere. Anything about a congregation. Now, mind you, they were writing in English. They were not writing in Greek, so it doesn't say ecclesia, and they weren't. So none of those terms are used. You're going to use this word congregation. You're going to change it to the word church. So this is 1,500 that they write the word church instead of congregation. And they also took some liberty and changed out the word synagogue to church. Now, there were some places never be able to sell anybody on the idea of that being a church because there just wasn't any way they were going to sell it. So they went on back to calling it of the synagogue, and they changed that the assembly of the saints. And what happens? A few hundred years pass along, and then everybody and their brother believes that there was a church in the first century. At the same time, you get the word Christian, right? And all of a sudden, everybody believes that there were Christians there hanging out on the Mount of Olives listening to Jesus teach. I mean, the whole. So, why would there be non Jews? Why did they have to have a Gentile court? Well, because the Gentile court wasn't a non-Jewish court. The Gentiles did not speak Hebrew. The Gentiles were Jews who did not speak Hebrew. The Gentile was for them. It was also for the Jews who did not dress like Jews. They did not wear this talit over their shoulders. They did not wear fringe hanging from their talit. Is the word. These were people who, like today, they call themselves Jews. Ever so often for a special event, for a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah, which did not exist at this time period 2,000 years ago. That's a thing. Though it does have its roots in the Bible, I'll give them that. It was not a thing until the Dark Ages. So they weren't doing that back then, is all I'm trying to say. When's the last time you went to church? Oh, I've never been to church, but I was, sprinkled on the head as a baby, and that makes me a Catholic. Okay, whatever. And then, well, when's the last time you went to church? Well, I went to church, last Christmas for the Christmas pageant, or on Easter for the Easter egg celebration and stuff like that. And the Jews have always, every religion does this. And so you had this Gentile court. These were the Jews. These were the Jews who didn't live it. Why were they there? Well, this was the biggest thing. This was like the Super Bowl. Passover was the big one. And it was like the Super Bowl. And everybody who was anybody and anybody who was nobody was there. They didn't have television. They didn't have radio. They didn't have iPhones and iPads and whatever else. They didn't have stuff like that. So, entertainment. And it was very entertaining. I'll give you that. I guarantee you it was entertaining. It had good music. It had good wine. It had good dance. Because they weren't prudish like the Puritans. They weren't worried about what people wore or didn't. This was a third world country. Think about every third world country they're seen on the what's the channel where they make the Geographic Channel. I mean, that's what we're talking about. The children wouldn't have even had any clothes on. Come on, people, this is not like today. They didn't have these prudish ideas about, oh, you can't dance. They didn't even know what hell was. Hell didn't exist back then. It did not exist back then. It's just like the word Christian and just like the word church. People started writing this, seeing it and believing it and writing it into it during the Dark Ages. And a few hundred years later, everybody's absolutely sure that Moses was worried about dying and going to hell. But anyway, I digress. Or maybe I undress. I don't know what I'm trying to say here. So this is a different time and a different world, and I'm all messed up now and I can't use it. How do you get rid of this stupid thing? I don't even know how I got it. Yeah, it's trying to do everything. No, I bet that's not what I. Oh, great! I got rid of a word now. I don't know. I knew this was a bad idea. That's if I did. I don't know.
What?
That's cool. I didn't know I could do that.
Yeah,
Check that out.
oh, look, you zoomed it.
Yeah, but if I could just. Now I've got more crap on it.
Video.
I don't even know where it went. Let me tell you guys a secret that nobody else is going to tell you because they want you to believe it. There is no such thing. If you can see this, you could see that there is no such thing. This stupid piece of junk is doing all kinds. I didn't ask it to do. This is what you call artificial intelligence. It's artificial because it ain't real. I got a half a scene. I don't even know what it just doesn't make any sense. You can't make it go away. You can't make it go to the left, the right, up or down. Why is it? It's going to force me to save it. It won't go away. All right. 23 chapter 23 verses what? Verses 15 through 21, and this is hopefully is my translation. And this page is doing crap again. But it says, and you shall count to you from the day after the Shabbat this explains why I can't. Why am I reading it here? I can't even find my place now. You shall count to you from the day after the Shabbat, from the day that you brought the sheave of the wave offering, 7 Shabbatot, that's Sabbath in plural, shall be complete. So it's the day after you bring the sheave offering, the sheaf offering. In the time of Yeshua, in the first century, they would go out into a field and they'd cut the wheat and then they'd wrap it with this towel and nobody would touch the wheat. And that's what they called the offering, and they would wave it around, and there was all kinds of fanfare that went with that, lots of music and dancing and all that other sinful stuff according to the Puritans. But anyway, they'd have a good time. Sabbath that led up to that, you count these 7 Sabbaths. That adds up to 50 days, by the way. Each Sabbath shall you number 50 days, and you shall offer a new meat offering to Yahweh, uses God's name, and you shall bring out of your wave loaves of 10th deals. They shall be of fine flour, and they shall be baked with leaven. They are the first fruits. They are to Yahweh. So is that sheaf offering the first fruit? No. Is money that you give the first fruit? Because let's say you're not a farmer. And you didn't make those loaves of bread from the first, that is down the wheat and bringing it in and doing whatever it is you do with wheat to make flour out of it and making to offering. This is what they're talking about very literally, but idiomatically it doesn't change. So if what you make is cash money or then yeah, that's your 2 loaves of bread. So how much money is that supposed to be? This particular offering is supposed to be the equivalent of loaves of bread. So whatever that cost is, that is the minimum that you have to give. It is never the maximum. There is no maximum that I can think of off the top. And it says, after it says that those 2 loaves baked, that 2 baked bread, 2 loaves, is the first fruits to God. Then it says, and you shall offer with the without blemish of the first year, and 1 young bullock and 2 rams. They shall be for a burnt offering to Yahweh, with their meat offering and their drink sweet savor to Yahweh. Now you got to realize this is for the whole Israel. This is for every we collectively have to give. All right, so and then it goes on and it says, then you shall sacrifice 1 kid of the goats for a sin offering, and 2 lambs of the first year for a sacrifice of peace. And the Cohen shall wave them with the bread of the first fruits for a wave offering before Yahweh. With 2 lambs, they shall be holy to Yahweh for the Cohen. For the who? For the Cohen. This stuff is for the Cohen. And you shall proclaim on that selfsame day that it may be a holy assembly to you. You shall do no servile work, I should say, therein. It shall be a statute forever in all your dwellings throughout all your generations. So if your dwelling isn't in Israel, are you exempt? No, because it's all of your dwellings, not just the ones in Israel. Just saying, just throwing that out there for the fun of it. Let me move on a little bit further. Because we've talked about how the it's been going on ever Sinai. I mean, that was when the first one happened. You remember the fire came down and it danced on the tongues of the seven. Yeah, that was the first Shavuot. Shavuot was not something new. It wasn't a new idea, I should say, in the 2nd century, but they hadn't had the fire come down. And so most people weren't really into that part of it. They were a little surprised when the fire came down that day, especially since it came down on the opposite side of the wall as they were expecting to dance on the tongues of a few people, didn't it? But so they're standing out there, and they're seeing the thunder and the lightning and the noise and the trumpet. I mean, Shavuot's always been a pretty big deal. And it always led up to what? The giving of God's law. That's what they got on day 50, is the give. So it's important that we make this connection. And I'm starting to think maybe I didn't commandments in here. Let me see if maybe I'm just getting ahead of myself. No, this is that. Chapter 2, verses 1 through 15, and this is from my translation. Drew 4,000 or 5,000 people in this guy's upper room, or at least out in his out. How it went down from heaven as a driving, violent wind, and it filled the house, which of course they're talking about the temple. That's the house. That's what it was called. Even back in the ancient Bible times, the temple was called the house. Flames, and it sat down on each of them. And that's exactly how what the Christians call the old. Every time it talks about it, and it talks about it a number of times. Ezekiel was one of them. Back up that language is as flames. That's what that Greek text actually says. It doesn't say that they saw clothes. It said they saw their portion of languages as flames. So when these men spoke, they were speaking in their language. And these Parthians and Hedians, no, I don't think that's one of them. They were all speaking in their own language, and as they spoke, the people saw the flames. They saw the voices at Sinai. Right? So then verse 4 says, and they were all filled with the spirit of holiness, either way, and began to speak the languages as they declared what the Spirit of God had given them. You have to understand the Spirit of God is the Torah, right? Everybody knows that. I'm not just out here in the universe all by myself, because every word that proceeded forth from the mouth of God is perfect. And it is the very Spirit of God that's the word for air, that's the word for breath. And it comes out of his mouth, it crosses across his tongue, it goes. And those are his words, and they are called his Spirit. So they were filled with his words. These were not men who did not know a dang thing about the Bible, jumping up and saying, hey, God gave me this word. No, they were filled with the from the Bible. These were rabbis. They were filled with this, and they spoke. And in verse 5, and there were dwelling at Jerusalem. They did not call it Yerushalayim back then. Nobody would have known what that meant. But there were dwelling some Gentiles, mostly Gentiles, all Gentiles, some Gentiles, one or two Gentiles. No, it said they were dwelling Jews. Jews. Devout men. So actually, that's not two different things. That's the Jews would be the devout men, right? Jews, devout men out of every nation under heaven. Well, there goes your two house thing right there. Looks to me like the ingathering had just taken place. And when the sound of this came to the people, they were confounded because everyone heard them speak in his idiot language. Why would they be confounded by that? Because nobody, up until that day had ever taught the Torah in any language other than Hebrew. Now, yes, they had translated the Bible, which the Christians call the Old Testament. They had translated that into Greek. But these people this was so bad of a thing to the Jewish population that the people who called themselves rabbis and taught from a Greek text were called dogs. They were. Remember Yeshua calling someone a dog once? I'll just leave that one for you to ponder. And they were amazed and marveled, saying, Behold, are not all Galileans? Galilee is what they would have said. And how can everyone hear in the idiot language of our birthplaces? See, because the only non-idiot language in language, and it means what you think it means. Parthians and Medes in the Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, and blah, 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 blah. There's a bunch of Arabians, we hear them speak the mighty works of God. Well, imagine that. They were filled with God's words. And they were all amazed and confused, saying to one another, What is this? But, I mean, think about why wouldn't they say, What is it? It's not consuming the sacrifice. It's consuming the rabbim, the rabbis. What is? But others mocked, saying, They are filled with new wine. But Capa, standing up with voice, and said to them, Men of Yehuda, and all who dwell in Jerusalem, be it known to you, and for these are not drunk as wine as you suppose, for it is only the third hour of the day. What are y'all, nuts? Of course, that's the smoke. We're all there right now. Just saying. Of course, that's what happened just prior to all of this, because that's what they call the. It's been so horribly translated by people who did not understand Judaism at all. That because they go around and you hear the King James Bible being translated from the original Hebrew and the original Greek. No, it wasn't. No, it was not. But because they teach that, now these people who didn't speak a word of either one of those languages. No, there's nothing in those people's bio that says anything of the kind. They were not translating this from the original language. They were translating the Elizabethan model to the King's English. So it was going from one dialect of English to another dialect of English. It would be like taking a regular, new, what do you call that? The new King James is the younger, more hip thing, more Americanized one, and translating it so that the Aussies understand it better. So instead of disciples, maybe they call them mates. I don't know. I'm not an Aussie. That's what they were doing. These were not being translated from these other languages. Why do people say it to this day? If you look in Kenneth Copeland's Bible, and you look in, what's her name? What's the lady? Joyce Meyer's Bible, they also translated from the original Greek and Hebrew. No, those people don't speak those languages. No, they don't. I've heard them try to pronounce some of those words. No, they don't. And I heard a Jew trying to talk about a Hebrew book that was, he thought, written 3,000 years ago. Whoa, was he wrong about that? But I heard this guy, his last name is Levin. He's a Jew. He goes to synagogue. And you wouldn't believe how bad he was butchering that Hebrew because he don't speak a word of it. These people don't either. Neither do Kenneth Copeland. How can they say that then? Well, because it wasn't originally written in English. So it had to have been at some point translated from the original text. Okay. One of these days, I should just sit down and talk to you about all that are made in all of the translations that are available to this day. Even the Messianic ones. They've made all the same mistakes, by the way. I'll go through that with you one of these days. So let me sum all of this up because we're not trying to stay here all night or anything. The 50 days after the Pesach in Egypt. And it was written on tablets of stone at the time. That 2,000 years ago, that on the 50th day after Pesach in the temple area is when, according to chiseled in stone, it was chiseled into the hearts of the followers of God. Now, I believe to give up their right to be right, their right to live their life the way they want to live it, their right to do that up, and they say, God, you actually can be in control of my life. I believe that people like that have chiseled hearts and not the way. No, if I'm doing that, Rob, well, there's some real simple things. Is it because we wear the loops? Nope. Is it because we come to Shabbat on saying come to Shabbat on Saturday seems weird in my head because we. But is it because we celebrate the feast? Yeah, it's part of it, but it's not that. The way we know double or triple the amount of money that we've always made, just think how much money we can give to the ministry. And that always comes with, but I got to work Saturdays and I won't be off on the holidays. You know, that always seems to follow that conversation. Who has the law of God chiseled in their heart, they know that that job's not for them. It's not. It's not God trying to give you a way to help out the ministry. Because 9999999999999% of the time, nobody does that when they get that job. Are there people who do live that have ever done that? Anyway, can I get this job? Well, sometimes. Are you letting God make the calls? If you say, well, he won't matter. Wow. As that you're supposed to honor your mother and your father, it's using the Hebrew word that means that you can't marginalize your mother and your father. It also means you can't embarrass them. Marginalize God. Oh, he's not. That's not what that means. Oh, God's not going to care about that little thing. Yeah, he does. If he didn't, it would. Remember, those words are perfect, pure, and holy that crossed out of his mouth. and onto this page. Say, then we know it's written on our heart. Even if we have to go back and look at the paper to see what it says, because we God and the obedience of God that actually is the true love of God in absolutely letting Him make the decisions. Paper, if we don't know, that's what makes us know what we can and cannot do without having to run to that piece of paper in some cases. Hopefully we get to the point where all of those cases we know this. It's supposed to have taken place that day, and I believe it did. I believe that it took me a whole lifetime to find that, and most everybody I know it took that long. It's like none of us found this when we were young. Boy, wouldn't that have been nice? And think of what could happen if we could get that message out to all the young people that are so lost in this world today. They're so lost that they don't see anything wrong with calling the police and telling them that their neighbor doesn't have a mask over their face. Oh my God. They think they're doing something right. That's lost. That's not just cowardly, that's lost. But that's what this is supposed to do. This book teaches us how to live. It teaches us how to live with each other. It teaches us how to act and be and all of that. And that's why it's so important. The fulfillment of Shavuot, perfect and final sacrifice, not a lamb, but the Lamb of God, who took away the sins of the world. What was the sins of the world? It was the broken covenant between the Judaism is the only religion sanctioned by God, and God does not have to make things right for the Christians when they find that out. That's ahead there. But tonight's all about, are we still filled with enough passion in our heart for God to be number one, and we want that fire to dance on our tongues. The fire of God's law is what was dancing on their tongues. And they were hearing it in their own language, just like you guys are hearing. That's what Shavuot was about, bringing the ability for God's law to be taught to anyone and everyone so that the whole world, maybe not like the Jews of today, at least the ones that are so prevalent that we all think of, not like the cartoons that we see on TV, but the Jews of the Bible, the people who lived a simple life. We either did what God said or we didn't. We either do what He said to do, or we're no part of that. It's a simple life. It's all simple. But it fills our heart with a passion because that fire is on our heart. And Messiah restored God's covenant so that God could put that fire on our heart, because He said He would whisper in our ears. He said He would persuade. I remember setting this down. Are you willing to drink the cup of passion? Willing to accept God's law being chiseled on your heart? It could be a little painful, I think, at first, but after a while, it's great. That is a good tasting cup of. Well, we got to go for now, friends. Hope you enjoyed this very weird service. We'll see you in the morning. Shabbat Shalom.